Welcome to 2021, your year in wine. It's the year to taste, the year to feel, the year to explore, and the year to see for yourself what the wine regions of South Australia have to offer. Welcome to the year 2021, the year of South Australian wine.
Good evening, I'm Olly Smith and welcome to this very special event with National Geographic Traveller and the South Australian Tourism Commission. I cannot wait to show you with my panel all of these fantastic wines we have in front of us and indeed the places, the culture, the views, vistas, wildlife and more. Now, you can talk to each other in the chat and there'll be some amazing links left in there by the National Geographic Travellers team. But the main thing about this evening is that we celebrate the things that we love most. And I'm delighted to be joined by my esteemed panel, Nina Caplan, writer and journalist. Good evening.
Good evening.
Nick Baker, naturalist, broadcaster and all-round legend.
Hello.
And Alexis Noble, restaurateur and wine expert as well. I've been looking at your wine list and loving it.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you here. I think let's kick off by saying, you know, the things that we really enjoy most about it. I love the warm welcome, the informality of the place, the down-to-earth wines. Nina, what do you love most?
Oh, that's a very hard question. I would say partly the weather and partly also the variety. The fact that McLaren Vale is different from the Barossa Valley. Barossa Valley is different from Kunawara. You can, wherever you go, you can find something different and fantastic wines made there.
So true, isn't it? There is such diversity. And Nick, from a naturalist point of view, it must just be a lexicon of loveliness.
And it is. And if you want big skies and special adaptations in your subjects, South Australia's got it all. It's also got the outback experience that everyone thinks about, and then you've got the amazing diversity of the coast, which is obviously where a lot of that region is where a lot of this wine's coming from. So yeah, really interesting. But I'm the odd one out because I'm probably the only one here that's not I was going to say wino, but that's the wrong word. Winey. It's Australia's really where I found my taste buds really, and I've worked out there with people that say, oh, I've got to show you this is really good, and I get dragged off into these amazing restaurants and amazing wineries, and of course most of them are packed with wildlife as well, so it's win-win-win.
It is a double whammy, isn't it? It's just a beautiful thing, and I agree with you entirely. The informality of those wines, it's just great. Alexis, what really stands out for you from South Australia?
I love how relaxed it is. I'm from Sydney, so Adelaide is so much quieter. There's no traffic. The nature is so close to the city. The restaurant scene is incredible. There's so many interesting new restaurants and so many young natural winemakers in the hills, Barossa, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and the views, I mean, look at it. The vistas, where these soaring images behind us to inspire us all evening. I think it's time we had a glass of wine. And if you've got the wines and tasting along wherever you may be, then we should be raising a glass with you. If you want to find out more about them, obviously the information is available online. And our first wine is Bird in Hand Rosé 2020, which is in Waitrose and Sainsbury's for $13.99. It's appropriate. Bank holiday weekend, it's been searingly hot. A nice cool glass of rosé does go an awfully long way.
I'll take your word for that. It looks good and it smells good. And it's got a bird in it, so that's good.
It's glorious.
Not in it, obviously.
This is from the Adelaide Hills, so let's have a look at the VT and introduce the region.
My name is Laura Carter and I'm the owner and winemaker at Unicozello, which is a winery based in Gummaraka in the Adelaide Hills. The Adelaide Hills wine region is a short 20-minute drive from Adelaide CBD. At Unicozello, our wines are quite unique because we're specialising in alternative varieties. These varieties have only been in the hills for about 10 years, so we're the first generation of winemakers to be able to experiment with them. In the Adelaide Hills, we have an amazing community of up-and-coming brewers, distillers, winemakers and artisan producers who are passionate about sharing produce with our local visitors. This can all be sampled at wineries, cafes and restaurants all throughout the region. There's a lot of innovation happening in Adelaide Hills wine region at the moment. We've got younger winemakers experimenting with lots of new methods. And we've had such great support from the local community for our business, and also restaurants in Adelaide experimenting with new wines and willing to show their customers something new and interesting. I'd love to see you here at Unicozello in the Adelaide Hills, and we can show you all our region has to offer.
Lush and leafy, the Adelaide Hills just 20 minutes away from the centre and just so beautiful. Slightly cooler, you know, wonderful influence on the wine. This is quite an interesting blend. It's Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Syrah. And I love it. It's quite a fulsome style of rosé. It's got nice fruit to it. It's one of those wines that I could totally see myself with big flavours. You know, spicy prawns. Rosé handles spice really, really well. Alexis, you've been up to the Adelaide Hills a lot.
Yeah, in 2019 around Christmas, I went on my trip home to Australia. I went with my mum, and we drove up to visit Vinterloper in the Adelaide Hills and had a day with them. And then they have a Lot 100 where they have a restaurant, and then it's a collaboration with so Vinterloper Wines, the Adelaide Hills Distillery. Adelaide Hills Cider, and there's a farm there, and they have a function venue and a tasting room and stuff like that. And so we spent the day up there with them.
It's just lush, isn't it? And it feels like it's a really creative place as well.
Yeah, really creative, really accessible, really easy to get there. Like we just hired a car. I took my mum, so she did the driving, so I could do the
Oh, that's a win.
Very
Yeah.
Cunning.
Yes, so mum was the designated driver,
Nice.
so that's very useful. And yeah, and then there's a lot of other winemakers really nearby that you can go and visit, and everyone's very welcoming. There's so many cellar doors, and they're extremely happy to have you to come and try a glass or two and have a chat.
Yeah.
And then most of them also have farms within their winemakers. So places like James Erskine's Drama, he has a cherry farm. So in the summer, if you go up there, you can go and try wine, but you can also go pick your own organic cherries, and there's all things to do like that.
Yeah, and organic and sustainability, it does seem to be a big part of the story as well. Nick, have you got some memories of?
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, for me, it's a very positive landscape because obviously we're using the landscape to create this, but at the same time, from a naturalist point of view, because I just went there for the wildlife. I mean, if I'm honest.
Yeah. But you did also say that this was a small miracle, the crushing of the...
Yes, yeah, well, there's everything about... I'm quite into my whiskies, but wine is a new thing for me. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, slightly more...
You're maturing.
Maturing a little.
You're evolving.
But I was always working with people that know their stuff. And I mean, my first day, I mean, we flew in... All right, Australians are straight talking, but I know that now, but at the time I kind of thought... They're exaggerating. This is the sort of thing they put in the brochure. You know, 20 minutes from the city centre, you'll have a glass of wine in your hand. Yeah, right. We did. It was like, 20 minutes. We were out of the airport in 20 minutes after we landed, and then we were in the hotel in 20 minutes from the airport, and then 20 minutes. Everything's 20 minutes away from everywhere.
It does feel like that.
But it was brilliant going up. And the Lanes was my first stop off, and it was also my first experience of wine tasting and sitting there. I had my binoculars in one hand, my field glasses in one, and wine glasses in the other. And sometimes it's difficult to know which one to bring to your eye. It was amazing, and the wildlife's all there, and that's the great thing. A lot of this is organic. There's a lot of they're looking after the terroir, and the environment around, because obviously it's all part of making good wine. And of course the wildlife knows it as well. I mean, I'm not sure everything's welcome there, because obviously there's some species which do too well. But it was lovely to sit there and just see the galahs and the roos bouncing around everywhere. It was just something really surprising for me, and it was lovely to do it all in one place.
Yeah, I think after the bushfires as well, everyone in the Adelaide Hills and South Australia in general is very focused on sustainability. They lost a lot, and now they're really focused on that not happening again, and really like climate change is in everyone's minds and stuff like that.
And is it the fact that these are all, even though they're quite big landscapes, that a lot of these wineries are family run. They're
the Nugent family,
and really friendly, and I like that, and that makes it easier to be in harmony with your landscape as well.
I think if you're right, if you're actually a steward of the land and you are deeply connected to it, you're going to have more insights into
they're invested, very heavily invested in it.
Well, exactly. If anything happens to the land, that's your livelihood.
Yeah.
And the bush is so close to the vineyards, like it's a part of the vineyard. So you can
quite often smell it in the wines, actually.
How are you getting along with this one, actually? How are you getting on with the...
I think this is lovely. And actually, talking of the galah birds, when I was at Bird in Hand, they have all these, they're beautiful. They're the colour of sunset. They're a slightly darker pink than this. These galah birds, this Australian bird. And they're all in the vineyards, probably eating all of next year's vintage before it has a chance to ripen. But it was beautiful to sit there with the wines and look out at the vineyards, and they have a really good restaurant too. And watch these birds sort of having in their restaurant essentially. So yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of food, Alexis, rosé it's quite a wide-reaching wine to pair, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm very crazy for pink, so I love all things rosé. But yeah, it's very accessible, and also Australia's hot most of the time. We don't really have a real winter, so you always want something a little bit chilled. And yeah, it goes with everything. Like this could easily go with something light and seafood, but you could even take it into something a bit heavier, like a pasta and something like that, and it'll work really well. So yeah.
And Nick, if you had to pair this wine with a wildlife moment,
Well, it's got to be. You're right. It's got to be somewhere hot. So I've got to be sitting there having a real dry and dusty day.
Nice.
It's got to have a reptile in it, but I'm not. People don't like me talking about the reptiles.
Why?
Well, because Australia's supposed to be full of feathered things and furry things, but there's lots. I like everything.
We're full of reptiles.
Exactly. Yeah. I'd like a shingleback. I think I go with a shingleback lizard and a rosé like this. This is lovely, actually. Is it me? I imagine it's got more substance to it. I don't know what the word is to use.
A bit more texture. You're right. Substance is the right word, and I mean they are
for how light it is. It does. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's often with rosé you think of it as going to be light and frivolous to just chuck back on a hot day, but actually pairing with food. Yeah, it's got a bit of substance to it. I think it's probably the Syrah that's been knocked into it as well that's given it a bit more dynamism.
Texture.
Yeah, a bit more. Yeah, in terms of other things, I mean, there's cookery classes, there's hot air ballooning. What other things would you associate with the Adelaide Hills? Yeah.
Well, when I was there, I stayed at Mount Lofty House, which has an incredible botanic gardens literally next door. You walk out of. I mean, it's a pretty amazing place.
Is that all native stuff? Is that native botanics, as it were?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like a living field guide for someone like me. If you're a visitor and you want to get a handle on the bush and what's going on there, sometimes it's really good to go to a place like that because you can. It spells out the things you're going to bump into when you go explore further afield. So it's quite a handy place.
And it was also great because I'd had a really good meal in the restaurant the night before, so I wanted just a bit of fresh air and a bit of exercise. And I just found myself, and it's on several levels, this beautiful, beautiful botanical garden right next door to where I was staying. So when I had enough of the levels, I could just go back to my room.
Sounds absolutely perfect. We love the Adelaide Hills. It's time to move on to the Barossa. If you're watching along at home, you can, of course, interact with each other in the chat room. And our team will also be delighted to give you some recommendations. And let's have a look at a VT which shows us all about the Barossa.
My name's Louisa Rose. I'm the chief winemaker at Yalumba. Only about an hour's drive from Adelaide, the Barossa is one of Australia's oldest wine regions. Yalumba is the oldest family-owned winery still making wine in Australia, established in 1849 when Samuel Smith, a brewer, came out from Dorset and planted his first vines under the moonlight. Today, Yalumba is known for traditional varieties like Grenache and Shiraz, as well as some of the more innovative and newer varieties to the world, such as Viognier. When you visit a family-owned winery like Yalumba in the Barossa, you will be steeped in history. You will be able to tour the grounds, see behind the scenes, visit our on-site cooperage where we make the barrels that we age our wines in. Most importantly, you'll be able to taste our delicious wines. We'd love to see you in the Barossa and at Yalumba.
Beautiful. And Yalumba specialising in lesser-known grape varieties like Viognier. They're doing a great job. I was intrigued by the talk of planting under the moonlight, Nina.
I was intrigued as well. I do slightly, I mean, it seems unlikely that it was heat. It could have been heat. I mean, Adelaide Hills is one of the coolest wine regions in South Australia, but that doesn't mean it doesn't get hot. So maybe it was just...
It's Barossa, though. It might have... Yeah, who knows?
Plants do react, like the vines do react differently depending on the phases of the moon. So
yeah,
the biodynamic and stuff like that.
Well, this is something
but
that's
I think
more...
you're right, it's probably to do with the heat stress.
But the heat stress, of course, it's Barossa, so they do get a lot of heat.
Makes sense.
I mean, it was something that 2,000 years ago, everyone was doing it. So if this is Germans coming in, they might have known about that and they might have said, no, we're going to do it like the old guys.
So let's have a look at the wine. This is Pusey Vale's Riesling 2020. It's available in Indies and Ocado from $15.99. Now, I love this wine because I think it must have been like 2003-04. I remember buying some 2 bottles. One I enjoyed there and then. The other I kept all this time for a special occasion. And I saw my dad and my mum last week for the first time in a year. And so I was like, today's the day. At Pusey Vale, it came out and it tasted incredible. And it reminded me that Riesling can be like a lime lightning strike when it's fresh and youthful. It can be dynamic and invigorating and beautifully fresh. As it ages, it can just unfurl layers and layers of complexity. I'm such a fan. And actually, Nick, I know you were telling me earlier.
Yeah, this is a Riesling.
You like a Riesling, don't you?
This is the sort of wine that if it's a day like today, it's hot. It's the first proper hot weather we've had of the year. The Swifts are zooming about. Obviously, this is the British version of this experience. Actually, you have the Swifts in Australia as well. Sit back, see the Swifts with a glass of this, and that's the perfect accompaniment for me. Forget the food, just birds and More birds, you see, more birds
I
and
like
wine.
this. The idea of bird watching and booze. It just sounds like a slam dunk holiday.
Boozy
to me.
birders.
Alexis, how are you getting along with it?
Yeah, it's really nice. It's got really good acid. It's not sweet. Sometimes you think Riesling is going to be sweet, but it's quite dry, acidic. Yeah, really good food wine.
Yeah.
Work really well with Australian cuisine. There's so much Thai, Vietnamese, Chinese influences. We've got a bit of spice, so it works really well with that, as well as our seafood. South Australia has so much incredible seafood, so that works really well with that as well. Yeah.
I think, Nina, you were telling me you were off the coast, getting oysters from the sea and shucking them straight off and then packing back the Riesling even.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. That was a little bit further west, Port Lincoln. But yes, they suit you up in dungarees and massive wellies, basically. It's not first date territory. And then unless your first date loves oysters.
That sounds great, yeah.
And then you wade out there and you get your oysters shucked and you're basically at a board table in the water, eating all these oysters, drinking Riesling, and yes, this would go extremely nicely. You could, if it got a little bit warm, you could just tip the bottle into the ocean and chill it down. It'd be lovely.
It's quite romantic, except for the waders.
Yeah, the waders is not a good look.
But then it's kind of uniform, isn't it? We're all in a uniform, so it's just, we're all in waders. I think the thing I love about Eden Valley is just the kind of length of time that's been spent there. There's 5th and 6th generation wine growers. They've really eked out a sense of place and worked out what works. And I think, you take Pusey Vale, for instance, it's basically one wine, one place, one mission. It's all about Riesling. And that, for me, as well, is sort of emblematic. The thing I love actually most about Aussie wine is that it's iconic in every iteration that it comes in. When I was kind of young and working in a wine shop, it was all about oaky Chardonnay, big Shiraz, and I love those wines. Now there's so much innovation and there's so much heritage. And I think, this really fits into sort of both categories, if you like. A Riesling that tastes that good, that also has been going for so long. I think they started in like 1847 or something, I think.
They've been going a long time. Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
But that's what I liked about the whole new experience for me. Arriving in Adelaide, I think we were talking about this earlier on, you can always head off at any compass bearing and you will hit a good winery at some point. And it'll be very different in a different way. And then you've got the big old companies that have been there for a while, how many other generations they've been running. And then you've got brand new ones right next door that are all, and it's just wonderful diversity. And you said something earlier on about just travelling along the road in the Adelaide Hills, and you're passing cellar doors left and right, every few hundred yards. And if you just want to explore the taste of the landscape, which is what we're doing effectively tonight, it's all there for you.
It is, isn't it?
It's great.
And I always find whenever I'm visiting Aussie wineries especially, there is always this sense that, it doesn't matter if it's not really for you. There's this idea that we just want to find you a wine that you enjoy. So the pressure's off, and it always feels like it's very personal. It's almost like somebody says, hey, what music are you into? Oh, you should try this. I think that's always a great approach with wine. And in terms of like places to stay in Barossa, you've got like Sequoia Lodge and places that are obviously amazing up in Adelaide Hills. But, are there places you particularly, have picked out?
Because we actually went in summer of 2019 when the bushfires were happening. So we were meant to go to the Barossa, but we didn't actually get to. And I'm hoping to get back this Christmas because I really like Maggie Beer, especially, as she's the godmother of Australian cookery, and she originates from the Barossa. She has a restaurant and a farm down there, so I've always really, really wanted to go visit there because Maggie Beer she's everything about Australian cuisine. And she really kind of pioneered the whole she's been doing sustainability forever, farm to plate kind of cooking that is throughout all of Australian cookery.
And in terms of categorising, the flavours on the plate from an Aussie perspective, because that's what you're all about. I mean, how do you kind of convey that? To me, it's kind of vibrant.
Modern
and
Australian, contemporary Australian. Well, it's changed so much, because Australia is a country full of immigrants, so we have so many influences. As a chef, I've been so fortunate that in all the kitchens I worked in, you work with so many people from other countries and they impart some of their knowledge on you. So I've worked with Nepalese, Thai, Vietnamese, so we've learned so much. And then also not lately, but in the last decade or so, a lot of my generation of Australian chefs are starting to focus on native Australian ingredients, indigenous botanicals and flavours, and incorporating that into our cookery, which is extremely exciting. It's a whole new flavour profile that doesn't exist in European cookery, and there's so much cool stuff. So Adelaide and South Australia particularly has been at the forefront of all of that.
Are you able to get your hands on some of those flavours in your cooking here?
A little bit. You can get dried stuff. It's not really sustainable to fly over fresh produce, but mainly I get it through Australian wine that's imported, but you can get dried ingredients and things like that. Yeah, like lemon myrtle, things like that. Actually, finger limes, which are native to Australia, they began to try and grow them in Spain, but it's not the same.
There's nowhere quite the same as South Australia.
You order them and they're so expensive and they're so dry. They're nothing like home.
I imagine it's a bit like Grenache. You can grow Grenache in Australia and it's fantastic. You can go Grenache and call it Garnacha in Spain and it's fantastic. They don't taste alike at all.
There's actually one native thing. They're called warrigal greens. It's known over here as English spinach or New Zealand spinach that actually is native to Australia. And when the first fleet came, the botanist or Banks, I think it is, he brought it over here. And it's actually, you can find it in English countryside everywhere, like wild. Yes, there's an organic market in Stoke Newington where my restaurant is. And when I first moved here, I went down there in the summer and they were selling warrigal greens. And I'm like, where did you find this? And yeah, so there are some things that have been brought over here. But yeah, you have to look really hard.
And the whole thing is so specific though. Everything speaks of its place, And Barossa, the first time I went there, I remember cresting over the road and just seeing the whole place laid out in this beautiful kind of golden hills. It was a lovely summery day, late summer. And just going there and seeing these, names of wineries that I'd read about and tasted and loved for years. Historic wineries like Langmile and then, being in the place and realising they're so close by and the place is so different. This is Eden Valley. It's pretty high. It's slightly cooler. Barossa can get really roasting, right?
Yeah.
in the sort of valley floor.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got to give a shout, in terms of accommodation, we've got to give a little shout out to the Louise.
Yes.
It's such an amazing place. So I think there are a couple of new places that are opening up, but that's been there for a while and it's a gorgeous hotel.
Yeah, we've got Kingsford, the Barossa is opening with fine dining, 16 suites, a wine tunnel and vault, and a bush bath.
Okay, what is a wine tunnel? What is a bush bath?
I don't know.
I need to go and find out.
In my mind, right, the wine tunnel and vault is like it's a pleasurable thing. Obviously, you go down there. Yeah. It's the sort of place you'd want to get locked in.
As is a bush bath.
Yeah, but the bush bath, I guess, is an outdoor, hot tub type thing.
I have actually stayed in a place that had one of those on a veranda in a different part of Australia, where you lie in your bath and it's completely shielded, so other guests can't see you, and you're just got wildlife all around you. You've got the bush.
Sounds perfect.
So I imagine it's that, and that is a
binoculars in the bath, glass of wine in one hand.
Binos in the bath sounds like a podcast.
That's the second series.
Do you know what? That's
Boozy birders, then binos in the bath.
Boozy birders and binos in the bath. There is just so much choice. Everything from kind of cosy barbecues to just sort of cosy B&Bs even, to more kind of grand places today. The Barossa really does, have it all. I love that wine. It means a load to me. We have to leave it behind. We do need to move on to our next wine, sadly. I'll come back to you later. We're now going to taste the Hidden Sea Sauvignon Blanc 2020, which you can find in Sainsbury's for £9. Now, this is labelled South Australia, but it is actually the winery, the Limestone Coast Winery, is based in Kunawara. And there's an awful lot to say about this wine. We'll talk about the flavours, but from a sustainability point of view, I think the headline is that for every bottle you drink and enjoy, it's 10 500 millilitre plastic bottles they will recycle and take out of the sea. So it's all about that. And Nina, I know you feel very, very passionately about this.
Yeah, no, I think it's an amazing project. It really is, because obviously our seas are clogging up with plastic. And there's the Re-Sea project which sort of supervises this, so they can't just say, oh yeah, buy some wine, we're going to do this. They're actually supervised to make sure they're doing what they say.
So that's probably like certified, scrutinised, and
yeah, absolutely. And it just means you can drink something that tastes very good, which I think this does.
Yeah, it's good.
And feel smug at the same time that you're helping save the planet, which is...
I'm kind of intrigued at how they do that, though, because it's like, if you don't buy enough wine, do they go, I'm just leaving those bottles there?
Finish the bottle.
Sort of make you feel guilty.
Well, no, exactly. No, I think they go out according to how much they sell. They go out.
Mind you, they have no trouble selling that, will they?
No, exactly. No, it's a lot, and it's from the Kunawara, which is not famous for Sauvignon Blanc, it's famous for Cabernet Sauvignon, but I think they're proving very nicely that they can actually do both.
Yeah.
So this is a limestone region.
This is the limestone region.
So this is
incredible.
The land of caves and
it is
sinkholes.
incredible. The Narrow Caves, which are 20 minutes from Kunawara. So this is the bit that's not 20 minutes from Adelaide. You can go from Adelaide.
It's not 20 miles.
It's
pretty
not,
much the only one.
But it's actually, I've driven it, and it's a 4-hour drive, and it's an absolutely beautiful drive that you go through Kuro National Park, and you've got the sea on one side and this sandy soil with this incredible wildlife and bush on the other. It's really worth doing. And then when you get there, the soil is mostly limestone, and there have been cracks in it historically, and animals have fallen into it historically a very long time ago.
I think they still are falling into them.
They probably still are falling into it, yes. But the interesting ones are the giant marsupials who don't exist anymore, who were falling into it sort of a couple of million years ago.
I've not been, but it's on my hit list of places to go, because it just looks mind-blowing. And the diving's awesome as well.
The diving is awesome as well.
Because I believe a lot of these
Kirby sinkhole dive site.
Water in them. I saw some of the photos online, and it just looks stunning. It looks like underwater sightseeing. It looks
one of the sinkholes you can dive in. There's another one that is it's a garden. They've turned, so basically it was a cave. The top fell in many years ago, and now it's this incredible garden, this sunken garden, and it's absolutely beautiful.
It strikes me that there's so many different kind of corners there as well. You've got the coastal influence, you've got the roasting rat and bully, and then you've got Kunawara, which is unique, and all of this spectacular kind of heritage in the land. I mean, what a place to just
We've not
nurture
talked
wildlife.
about the sea yet.
We haven't talked about the sea.
Which must have a massive influence on the wine.
Ocean.
It does.
We don't have seas, we have oceans. Yeah, we have
So
oceans.
what does it do? How does that influence the wine?
Generally cooler climate, like if you're coastal, it'll give it more zippy flavours, more acidity and zing. So even if you're in a roasting hot place, a little cooler kind of moderation flavour.
This one needs to hang out more. See,
we will hang out more.
The interpretation.
We will.
Zippy flavours.
It's zippy and zingy, and it's like, it's like.
And of course, you've got the weedy and leafy sea dragons, which are the iconic emblems of South Australia, all off the coast there. So if you got the sinkholes and the wine to the left, and then you've got all that wonderful sort of oceanic biodiversity to the right. And,
I think we need to find a weedy, leafy wine. I think that's the challenge.
I've seen. We were talking a little bit early on about bottle designs and label designs. I have seen them, and I drank it, but I bought the bottle for the weedy or leafy sea dragon. I can't remember which species it was now on the bottle, but there is one out there somewhere.
Oh, of course. It strikes me as well that this kind of wine, it's talking about the sea. They're recycling plastic from the sea. The sea contributes to Ben Pigram making the wine the way he does, the stainless steel, keeping it nice and fresh. And the landscape is entirely down to this kind of the layers of the ocean.
Yeah, it's an ancient sea. That's why it's limestone.
Yeah.
Many millions of years ago, the whole thing will have been underwater. And apparently it sort of rolled back progressively. So you got sort of the Mount Gambier bit, and then eventually Kunawara. And so you've got this thick limestone. And it's just, but also it occurs to me while you were talking that one of the reasons one of the things we have to thank for this wine is precisely those cooling breezes off the ocean, because Kunawara is Kunawara partly because it's slightly cooler than several of those other regions, and it's cooler because it gets the ocean. So thank you, ocean.
So you've got your geology, you've got your archaeology, you've got, because it's all Pleistocene animals in the cave, so all those sort of extinct marsupials, you've got your wine, you've got the birds, you've got the
as
fish.
well.
Yeah,
How big
this
are
is
we
it.
talking?
Well,
Big, like twice. I can't remember that in feet, but
You
you're talking
wouldn't wanna
fully
meet
twice
one.
the size. You wouldn't want to meet
wouldn't want to meet one. A
They had
marsupial lion.
giant, the marsupial lions.
Marsupial line.
Yeah.
That sounds terrifying.
But they were. And I mean, the thing is, man's influence on Australia has been mixed, to say that this is one of the better things we've done with Australia. But yeah, there's been, I think our biggest marsupial carnivore left is the Tassie devil, which is sort of, it's only that big. So, but there were things massive. Think of an animal anywhere on the planet, and there would have been an equivalent with a pouch in Australia at some point. And they exist as fossils, as sub-fossils, I think we call them now, where they've fallen into these giant pitfall traps, which is effectively what they are. They just came stumbling along and fell in, and they've been preserved in these karstic conformities in the landscape. So, I mean, karstic landscapes are brilliant. So I imagine it's the caving there. I've not been, but the caving must be brilliant. Whether you're diving it or walking it, just actually exploring the caves themselves. And I know some of them are open to public, but...
What's really, I mean, talking of the giant animals, I have seen a footprint of, I think it was a giant wombat, and it was a footprint, and it was about this
Wow.
big.
No. And you hadn't been drinking too much of this?
I hadn't been drinking, but after that, I think I ran off and found a glass of wine. But yes, the walking is incredible, and also one of the things when you go down into the Victorian cave, which is one of the Naracoorte caves, is they show you how they got in originally when they in Victorian times when they rediscovered it. It's really small. I mean, now it's like lovely, and in you go, and you're very welcome. And of course, no torches, and well, they probably had a candle or something. But it's a really they had to crawl through, and they were digging it out as they went. I mean, big respect to those Victorian cavers.
I need to go.
We will.
That sounds amazing.
£9, I think that's a bit of a bargain. Doing something great for the environment as well as tasting as good as it does. £9 in Sainsbury's. We must leave the Limestone coast, and it is time to wing our way to the McLaren Vale with a little VT.
Hi, I'm Chester Osborne, 4th generation winemaker, Darrenburg, McLaren Vale, South Australia. Darrenburg is in the heart of McLaren Vale, just a quick 40-minute drive from Adelaide city centre. Having been growing grapes in McLaren Vale for over 100 years, we realise the importance of being sustainable and passing it on to the many generations to come. South Australia is ideally suited to organic farming, sustainable farming, biodynamic farming. It's got the perfect climate for it. It's got such a diverse range of soils here that gives so many flavours, so many characters. Each district makes amazing wines in their own little right. And that's why 80% of all the premium wine of Australia comes from South Australia. If you like wine, come to South Australia. You'll see great rolling vineyards, and you might even see a Darrenburg cube in the middle of one of them. Come and see us sometime.
He's just such a character. I mean, Chester is just a legend in winemaking terms. And I remember it was one of my first visits actually going there. And he lined up so many wines, all of which were kind of magnificent and charismatic and fun. The thing that really gets me though, and we're going to talk about this wine, which is the Custodian Grenache 2016, which is available in independent wine merchants from $13.95. But while the panel are just having a quick slurp on that, I think the thing that really gets me about, Chester is he is very innovative. I mean, the cube is just jaw-dropping, and it came to him as kind of to reflect the puzzle of wine growing and winemaking. But it's also that he's become so friendly to the environment. And McLaren Vale is really an epic place for sustainability. I know, Nick, you had a pretty awesome time at Gemtree as well.
Yeah, well, we arrived on our mountain bikes, and obviously you're in the area, you've got to, I mean, it is stupendous. And everyone's saying, well, you like wine, or if you don't know much about wine, this is the place to start in some ways, because it makes wine accessible. And I didn't really understand what they meant. They said, just wait. You walk in the door, and the moment you walk in the door of that building, it's as bizarrely surreal as, well, it's more surreal than you could ever imagine. You almost become a grape. You are then channeled through this exhibition, which is a multi-sensory experience. It's an immersive experience where you find yourself in the fermenting vats. You've been pummeled with video footage and sound, and then there's bizarre, I remember bizarre staircases with surreal art all over it, and then, yeah, just the architecture of that cube in itself is fascinating. But it took away the thing that's always scared me about wines, which is the I use the word snobbery, but it can be.
It can feel intimidating.
And to someone who's a bit timid, not that I'm timid, but I mean, it's like I don't want to get into something that I don't really understand. I'm going to look stupid. That place takes it away. It's like, if you like it, that's good enough, and we're going to tell you why we think you like it, but this is how we get to what you like. And it really was a great experience. But then just down the corner, I mean, what he was saying there, what Chester was saying about that's quite a big winery. But my mountain bike guides from Scapegoat, actually, a guy called Ian, he said, well, you like this? There's a nice little biodynamic place down the road called Gemtree. And we went down there, and it was wonderful. It was just this little tiny family thing. They've got their own little nature reserve where they're sort of doing some rewilding. It's proper biodynamic, which means it's not organic. Well, it is organic, but it's more than organic. It's a kind of a Steiner philosophy, which is all about complete ecosystems. It's about plants working with animals, with good quality soil, and of course no contaminants, no pesticides, nothing like that. And it works. And there's nothing better. It's good at so many levels. And when the product is, well, it speaks for itself. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it is such a positive experience. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that part of the world. And yeah, I'm itching to get back, as we all are, I know,
well,
but,
I couldn't agree more. And I know natural wine is a big thing for you as well. Can you just explore that for us? And
Yeah, like I never set out to have a purely natural wine list, but when I opened the restaurant and when I really started to get into wine more in 2017, it is just what I gravitated towards, because it tends to be anyone who's making natural wine, especially in Australia, they're similar generation to me, they're younger, they're generally more independent. We share the same values, like it's the same values that in a restaurant you have when it comes to food and where it comes from and how it's made, et cetera, that is the same in the wine. And yeah, it's generally a younger, more experimental kind of winemaking and suits Australian cuisine, I think, a lot more. It's less heavy, whereas this is like a heavy red that, like, when we have people come into the restaurant and like some older gentlemen, they ask for something like this is boozy and stuff like that. So we still do both. But when it comes to natural wine, yeah, it tends to have a bit more acid, a bit more it's got that residual fizz, all the fun stuff, really cool labels.
you see, that I wanted to talk
More
about
accessible, yeah.
Because the label, look, the Darrenberg stripe is obviously, well famous, but the natural wine movement has done brilliant things for labelling. And I reckon South Australia is producing some of the most eye-catching wine labels.
In South Australia, like that is kind of the home of natural wine. It's where like people like BK Wines and stuff like that, they really pioneered it. But I think it's also, we're not confined by tradition. It's like when you go to Europe and stuff like that, if you go to a region like the Mosel in Germany and stuff like that, the land is passed down from generation to generation, generation to generation. I think that's maybe why maybe European, you find it less accessible. Whereas in Australia, they're just farmers.
Yeah.
Like they're not rich, they're farmers, and a lot of them are first generation, second generation. It's a very different kind of winemaker.
it makes sense when you said it's not. You don't have those generations of tradition holding you, well, not holding you back, well, yeah, holding you back, or putting you in a corner. Everyone expects the same thing.
And I think that's why when you have we do traditional Chardonnays, we do traditional Cab Savs, but that's why you can find so much variety within the grape. And then also the climate, it's very different we have European varieties, but it's made in a very different climate. So that's why,
I'm going to come in from the other side here and say I don't disagree with anything you said, but would like to say that one of the things I really like in McLaren Vale is the Grenache. And they offer, these guys and Yangara as well, who are not very far away, are happy to admit that they've taken a lot of hints and tips from the Southern Rhone, which is kind of a natural home of Grenache, and that they've obviously adjusted to their very different soils and their very different climate. And I know at Yangara they have sheep mowing the rows between the vineyards for them. I don't think they've got round to that yet in the Rhone, although they might.
They might.
But yeah, some of it is not. Some of it, I agree, is moving away from what's done in Europe. But some of it is also saying, well, what can we take from you guys? You're the old guard. We're the new guard. What can we learn from you? It's not about starting fresh.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the beauty of South Australia. You do have those big traditional houses like Penfolds, Yalumba, who make large quantities. But generally when it comes to natural wine especially, and the younger makers, they don't have big parcels of land. So it's very small production, and that's why they also do things differently. And then also, it's like there's a lot of different regions, but it is comparatively quite close. So people can't, like, who don't own their like, a lot of natural winemakers don't own their land, they buy fruit. So they buy parcels from a place like McLaren Vale or Clare Valley and then mix it together, which creates something called new entirely. But yeah.
And sorry, Nick.
So, no, I'm wondering if this is the right time. We're talking about biodynamic.
It's always the right time. It's always the right time.
It is after 4. We're talking about biodynamic and organic, and I've heard it talked about. And again, I don't know, so I'm just asking you. And you may laugh at this, but I've heard some of the European wines, when they're biodynamic, described as being a bit farmyardy.
That's faulty wine.
What does that mean?
Well, that's a nice phrase for faulty wine.
Farmyardy is not necessarily a great thing.
You don't really want farming. It's like mousy, horsey. I don't think they're good words for wine.
No, I don't think they're good wine, but good
except
words.
if it's Burgundy.
Yeah,
then it's allowed to be farming.
Then it could be a bit
if it's
funky.
not from Burgundy, it probably shouldn't.
It's kind of like
taste like a farming.
funky.
A little bit. If you're being polite, you'd call it earthy, but it's kind of earthy plus. And I agree, it is basically, it's not necessarily that desirable. However, I think what the biodynamic thing does for me is I love that it gives me confidence that the land is being treated with respect, as are the workers, the place. The values are, you know, to be lauded. I also think it does give more attention to detail in the vineyard. Because you can't rely on herbicides and pesticides, you can't rely on backup plans, you have to get it right first time, working in harmony with what you've got. And when I think of McLaren Vale, I think of like the amazing beaches, you know, and the sustainability movement doing so well there, and South Australia becoming the first state to ban single-use plastics. You know, all of those things converge in that sentiment. And it's from small plots of land to a great idea that really South Australia is leading the way.
Yeah, there's also a lot of principles within biodynamic. Like, not everyone is fully biodynamic because it takes a long time and quite expensive to get the certification, but a lot of winemakers take some principles of it because especially as the climate is changing and South Australia is getting hotter and hotter, whereas in Europe you might see those perfectly manicured vineyards. That's not so common in South Australia because especially they've found to have the natural grasses amongst the vineyards protects the vines and the fruit from heat. And yeah, like you said, they use sheep.
Feeds the sheep.
And yeah, for manure and also to mow the grounds. And yeah, it works a lot better. The beauty with especially the natural winemakers, the younger ones in South Australia, is they're all experimenting, and it's such a great community that's together they all figure out what works and like share their knowledge and stuff like that.
Yeah, the generosity is really
Huge.
impressive. I have to say, I got to do, it's a wildlife thing actually, one of the coolest experiences I've had to do while going around wineries was feeding kangaroos. This was at a winery in McLaren Vale, Woodstock Wines.
Oh, yeah.
And they give you a little baby bottle, and these kangaroos come bouncing up to you, and you feed them a little. I'm sure you've done this. Yeah, exactly. And you've got your phone in one hand, trying to take pictures so that the kids can see, and you're mostly taking pictures of your feet. But it was.
You have to put the glass down first. You know that.
I'm
That's where you
Australian,
go, right?
but I still get so excited when I see the kangaroos hopping through the vineyards. It makes me
Do you know what it is?
excited.
And you, when you stay, because a lot of these wineries there's accommodation. I mean, it's sort of this beautiful sort of mix of all these things. But you know it's good. You know the landscape's working in a biodynamic way when you wake up to an amazing dawn chorus. And
Well
that
said.
for me was always the thing. When you hear lots of birds, life's good.
Yeah.
And that's very apparent in this area.
Oh yeah, when I was in Kunawara, I actually glamped, which is as closest to camping as I ever wish to get. It wasn't camping.
Yeah,
there was a chaise longue in my
Really?
Yes, it was great.
They're quite heavy.
Had a proper bed and everything. And I woke up to kookaburras laughing in the tree next to the tent. This was at a winery actually called Bellwether Wines. She has these tents in her. She has a very cool winery. It's an old shearing shed, sheep shearing shed. It was used for that up until the early 2000s, in fact, but from the 1860s. And now they've repurposed it as this really laid-back winery where you can wander in and you can have a couple of glasses of nice wine. And they do a chef's table as well. It's great. And then you stumble out into the field and you find your glamping tent.
And then all the wildlife laughs at you.
It laughs at literally the wild, but that was so good. I mean, what could be more Australian than waking up in a vineyard with a kookaburra laughing at you?
That sounds great.
With that, it is time to move on to our final VT, to the Clare Valley.
I'm Alistair Pike here at Pike's Wines and Pike's Beer Company in the Clare Valley, South Australia. We've been making wines here since 1984 and have a family history of brewing beer since 1886. The Clare Valley is located less than 2 hours drive from the CBD of Adelaide and is the gateway to the Flinders Ranges and the outback of South Australia. The Clare Valley is world renowned for its premium wines, especially its Rieslings, but we're also starting to gain recognition for our beers, gins and produce. Craft beer has really taken off in South Australia over the last 5 to 6 years, with breweries popping up all over the state. Today, Pike's Beer Company produces a range of ales, lagers and seasonal releases right here at our brewery and winery in the Clare Valley, South Australia. So when you can, come down to South Australia and see us at Pike's. I'd love to pour you a pint.
I love that. Nick was just reaching out to the screen to pick the cold beer off. We are slightly melting in the studio, but what a place Clare Valley is. It is so worth the trip. Lovely and hilly, some beautiful iconic wineries. But let's talk about the beer and all of the other things that are going on in South Australia.
They've got great names as well. I've been looking at, there's one called Rabbit and Spaghetti, apparently, and the other one I like was Grumpy's Beer House. I really want to try. I don't know what the beer is like. I haven't tried it, but I want to try a pint of Grumpy's Beer House because that sounds great.
Schooners of beer. I mean, that's something the world needs more of, isn't it? Just those epic little. Oh, I love them so much. You know what I loved? I went to Kangaroo Island and I loved the gin there.
Yeah.
I just was blown away using the local botanicals, and it was something that, you know, it was on such a small scale at the time I was visiting. It was literally on basically a stovetop pot still. But I was just so inspired by the heart and the kind of the mission behind it. You know, the larks were just devoting their lives to it. So beer is obviously a huge part of Aussie heritage as well. Can we touch on that? I mean,
I'm probably the only Australian who does not drink beer.
Yeah.
That's why you had to leave, isn't it?
It's too much liquid.
They drove her out.
It's too much liquid. You have to consume too much liquid. But I do gin. I'm very much into gin.
Nice. Isn't that what the bush is for, though? Isn't that what, you know, you drink too much liquid, that's why the bush is there, surely.
Who knows? But as far as gin goes, have you got any favourites?
Yeah, like I really do like how there's a lot of distilleries that are using native botanicals to infuse with the gin. Like, so I actually have one, it's a green ant gin. So it's a collaboration with an indigenous company called Something Wild, and they actually infuse the gin with green ants, which have a like lime taste to it, and then you have a few little green ants in the gin. And then they also make a wattle seed whiskey. So they use wattle seed, which has like a coffee aroma, and make a whiskey with that. So they're doing some really interesting, cool stuff with some native ingredients, while also incorporating the indigenous community and taking the knowledge from them, and using, it's all very sustainable, because what the most sustainable thing you can grow in Australia is native ingredients.
Yeah. And relationships as well, you know, it's so important.
And respecting the knowledge and the culture of our Indigenous population, and creating like an economy for that. And it's so unique. You can't find it anywhere else in the world. There are flavour profiles that do not exist anywhere else. And also, everything in Australia, it has to struggle. Like, we don't have heaps of water, we got a lot of heat, so it has to work hard to grow. And this creates these amazing antioxidants and flavours that you don't find anywhere else.
Which, of course, is also, that's what happens with the vine. I mean, the vine grows best when life is difficult. You get fantastic wine. You find yourself nice flat land, really fertile, and you get heaps of grapes and boring wine.
I sometimes feel a bit guilty about that, because you are basically, it's kind of the perfect stress level for the vines, isn't it? If they're overstressed, obviously they don't really do much, and if they're understressed, they don't. But you want that low vigor, interesting places basically that other plants can't really thrive, but vines can. They're slightly miraculous, aren't they?
They are very miraculous.
I love them.
Yes.
Nick said something lovely earlier about this being the greatest miracle created by mankind.
I think it is. Well,
I love that.
Certainly in Australia, it's probably one of the best things that's come out of Australia. And of course, it's a discovery for me. I mean, I've spent my career adventuring all around the world, and I didn't expect, when I got flown to Adelaide, I didn't expect to be having. I thought, because I've done quite a lot in Australia, so I wasn't expecting to see anything different. But when they took me to the food market, that was the first. That was the first port of call. Is the food market in Adelaide, and again, it was like a field guide for me. It was like you mentioned all the gin and the botanicals. The green ants are one of my favourite things. I mean, I'm really into entomophagy, the consuming of insects, which sounds super yucky to a Westerner. But actually, when you hang out with indigenous folk all around the world, this is a regular thing. And in Australia, those green ants. I mean, you mentioned it in the gin as if it's like an everyday thing, which it probably is for you guys. But for a Brit, the whole idea of drinking gin with insects in it is something else. But it's amazing. I mean, I had like finger bowls of green ants served, given to me in this market, and it's such an amazing, zingy, exciting flavour. And it when you say it's all about these flavour profiles found nowhere else in the world, it can't get more distinct than green ants.
Totally, and we are sort of used to things like that with the Garvey worm and your bottle of tequila wherever it is. But I want to kind of get a bit more information about the flavours of insects, because that is fascinating. And can you talk a little bit about the sustainability of it as well?
Well, insects are obviously the most efficient way of turning plant material into animal protein. So it is, you could talk about it being, insects could save us when it comes to, food in the future. But interesting, the whole thing with ants as well, as I know, ant myrmecologists, they call them, ant scientists who basically can walk around the rainforest and go, and they don't need to get a key out, scientific key, and how the handle ends up to work out what group of ants they're from. They can literally take them off the tree and eat them and go, oh yeah, that's one of them. And they can identify them by flavour.
No.
So yeah, this is totally true. So insect flavours
Like wine tasters, but for insects.
But for
yes,
ants.
well, I'm probably better at that than I am at wine.
Quite a bit of acid, right? Yeah, they're really punchy.
They've got a lovely tang, but not all ants, you see. That's the thing. The green ants are as they might sound. And when you see them, they look like they taste. So they look limey. They're kind of like limey green. I mean, these ants are incredible. They're the ones that sew the leaves together and create these. You know, look up in a tree in Australia and you see a cluster of leaves sewn together. It's almost certainly going to be green ants. You know, and they have a weaving ant, so they sew the leaves together. And but they just, unfortunately for them, they taste really nice as well. But they're very sustainable. They're super sustainable. So if you're going to eat any kind of animal, eat an insect.
So have you got a favourite insect?
What to eat?
Yeah.
Well, I've eaten lots. I mean, invertebrates generally I've eaten lots of.
Did you try witchetty grubs when you were in
have
Australia?
tried witchetty grubs, much to the amusement of the,
They're good.
of the village. They are good, yeah.
They make a really
expect to
nice
be-
hummus.
They-
You do like it. You can basically pulverize them.
Really? You emulsify them? Really? Wow.
But not emulsify. No, pulverize.
Emulsify?
No,
that's a
but
different
it was like a hummus. It didn't taste like hummus.
Really?
It was good
Wow.
though. On crackers, witchetty grub paste on crackers. It was good. It was delicious. I don't know what
I like
wine
them
you'd
roasted.
match with
I
it.
like them roasted. I don't necessarily like. I mean, I will eat them, straight out of the bush, as it were. But the texture, they're quite explosive in the mouth. They're under pressure, so you bite into them. There's a little bit of a moment, but yeah, again, it's no different. I mean, look, we've just talked about eating oysters.
Yeah, you're right.
That's true.
It's no different. It is no different. It's all in there,
It's
isn't
all
it?
in the head. And we eat shrimp, we eat crab.
Yes.
They're invertebrates. They're the insects of the sea. So it's a marketing thing as much as anything else. Is if you can understand, if you can accept that these are just flavours, these are things, and if you know they're sustainable, then just like we're talking about biodynamic wine, eating biodynamic insects, there's no problem with that. It's another big positive. But I want to see more of it, definitely.
Well, I'm sure you're going to. I mean, everybody at home is watching thinking I came here for wine tasting. I'm going away an insect eater. I've had so many just extraordinary moments, within the landscape, experiencing, I mentioned Kangaroo Island and the gin. I remember having a glass of gin at sunset, sat on the Remarkables, the rocks, on Kangaroo Island, looking at the sun going down. And it just blows me away that somewhere so far away can make me feel so at home in the grand spaces and with the welcome of the people. That's really what it always comes back to, is that the generosity of spirit, the kind of open-handed welcome. I've never felt like a stranger in South Australia.
We are the best at hospitality in the world.
Why is that,
We
though?
are
Why
very
is that?
good.
Because you are. I mean, I don't...
Honestly, our wage costs are really high, so there's less of us, so we work really, really hard.
Okay, well, that's fair.
It's a very
Same as stressing the grapes out. It's the same thing. If you're a little bit stressed,
And it's a
you
proper
appreciate the
career
simple
for
things.
us. People who work in hospitality in Australia, it's a real career and they dedicate their lives to it. It's not just a job you're doing whilst you're doing something else. They dedicate their whole life to it. It's the most important thing in the world to them. So yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. Well,
Comes across, definitely.
it certainly does. And hopefully we've shared a little bit of the warmth with everybody watching. And it just really remains for me to say thanks so much to all of you. Thanks, Alexis, Nick, and to Nina. Enormous thanks to South Australian Tourism Commission as well, and to National Geographic Traveller. Thank you to you for watching. We hope you've had a great time. I must tell you about the National Geographic Traveller Food Festival, which is happening in London in real life next month. You can find out all the details online. If you're joining us for the VIP event, stand by. We will wet our whistles and join you in a moment. You'll be able to ask us questions. If you're not, have a splendid evening. Travel safely if you're going anywhere, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.